Last week I was discussing the nature of the measured universe. That is, the universe that we imagine that has lots of pieces in it, lots of measured segments, is not actually the real universe. Due to the mind's capacity to use mathematics, which is essentially the idea of measuring things, the perceptual reality of the human being gets caught inside of its ability to measure. It becomes hypnotized by the mind's creation of objects which seem really solid. So it's that solidity of perception in regards to the way the mind operates that is illusion, that is non-reality. We could say, therefore, that reality then, the real, is that which is non-measured, non-fragmented. Measurement breeds fragmentation, what Lao Tzu called the 10,000 things, whereas the real, the true, that which actually is immeasurable. It's non-measurable. The mind's habit to measure, like any other activity that the mind engages in, can become a hypnotic trance when it goes on performing this action all the time as a normal course of functioning. So while measurement is important, and the ability to see what appears to be a world of objects, while those things are important, they can easily become a liability when it comes to living a life in happiness, in joy, in ease, and release. Here I'm speaking specifically about release from the conditioned mind. The conditioned mind, which is always putting together, computing the reality of the relationships of objects that it believes is outside of itself. So this reality, this world that is projected in the measured mind, by the measured mind, can help with certain aspects of action, but beyond that small area becomes a serious liability in terms of living life in reality. Certainly we can't say that the measured universe is non-real in an absolute way. We just say that it is a way of seeing that we use in order to do other things. If you look closely at anything that you feel to be an object, if you look at it very closely, such as a dog or a cat, you'll find that what you believe is objectively real, that has an actual location, is actually non-accurate. It's inaccurate. Even in a human being, the skin has pores on it. It breathes just the way your lungs breathe. Your body respirates So obviously there are a number of openings in the skin that cause your skin to actually blossom into the very environment in which it seems to be operating. Everything is like that. If you looked at a rock, you'd find, if you looked very deeply, that it's filled with air, it's filled with space. It's just coagulated sand, which once was completely smooth and spread out. Somehow, through pressure, through geological conditions, it gets condensed into what we perceive as a rock. Now that rock as an object, which is the product of the measuring mind, is a complete illusion. It continues to hold all the space in it that it once retained in its previous form. The same thing with this body, which has as its composition all the elements: earth, air, water, fire, and space. When a person dies, all of these elements go back to where they were. Everything is borrowed. So you might consider your body solid, but the evidence is to the contrary. The reality is that there is no solid demarcation, no separation between the body, this thing that we call a physical form, and the movement of everything else that surrounds that body. In fact, the body craves its own elements. It craves what it is and reflects these things back to it in the form of its desires. It craves heat, it craves air, it craves water, etc. You get the idea that this whole notion, even this building that we're in, is not really solid. If you start examining parts, that wood is extremely porous, which is why you have to paint it with something to prevent water from coming in. Everything is like that in here. Everything is composed of subtle, soft components that ultimately are porous and break down. If this is true of every object, then the world of objects that the measuring mind sees is an illusion. It's a convenient illusion that allows us to operate in a conventional reality where we are all separate from one another. But in terms of the real, we are actually operating within a continuum that has no inside or outside, no up or down. We are actually existing in a de-objectified reality. A non-objectified reality. And to remember that is to begin to live inside the real. First, remembering it as an idea. Sort of waking up out of the dream that you're sort of clunking around in your life like an object bouncing from one place to the other. This heavy, sad being bouncing around from one location to the other because it believes it's an object to itself. The mind forms its idea, even that your body is an object to you. So once you get deep enough into this measurement consciousness, it's really a doorway into a hellish kind of existence. So the art of stepping out of the de-objectified world, I could say this differently, stepping into the non-measured real, the non-measurable real, and popping this illusion of objectivity and separate functioning is in fact the spiritual life, what we call spirituality. But this is a very real waking up process. This is not some fancy idea that we talk to all get happy with one another, then we can all go home and live our lives as happy object-based beings thinking about non-measurable reality. When we talk about the spiritual reality, we are talking about an actual form of existence, an actual form of perception that you can live inside of, to continually undermine this habit of the mind to create finiteness. So if finiteness is at the root of this issue, then we can begin talking about a non-finite reality, which is infinite. So this doorway out of the measured universe into a non-measurable universe, by finding the real, which is not an object, which is not a state that is delineated by the mind, is the beginning of true waking up out of the dream of a solidified relativity, where objects are always thrashing at each other. To hold on to this precious memory of the non-objective nature of the real is enlightenment, is what coming into enlightenment signifies. It's what the Buddha talked about. It's what the Indian scriptures in the Vedic tradition talked about. It's what Native American spirituality and primordial cultures have talked about. This idea is not a new idea. But nevertheless, there is a necessity for human beings to confront this as a new idea, always. Since there seems to be set up a kind of war that goes on in life, in society, between those who live in an objectified reality and those who live in the real. That is, there are ways of organizing and functioning in relativity which come out of either one of these paths or these ways of seeing. Whichever one you choose to follow becomes a way of living for you. And I don't want to impose my belief on anyone, but to me, to live inside of a measured reality, which is inherently illusory, in the sense of it not being solid objecthood, is an invitation for disaster to the living aspect of a human spiritual consciousness. And that to learn how to remember and to wiggle out of the temptation to suffocate oneself inside of limited viewpoints is the ultimate challenge, the ongoing day-to-day reality of living in a human culture, which can behave very destructively, but also allowing oneself to become free of that culture at the same time, so that one can breathe into a different space, that precious, sacred, non-measured space, which brings the highest form of bliss, the highest form of happiness, the deepest sense of interconnectedness, and therefore of compassion. So when you realize your life is at stake based on this choice that you make to embrace the real, then you become vigilant about your entire life's style, your lifestyle, in the sense of what it's upholding moment by moment, what you're actually affirming. And so a person who lives in the real will carve out, will sculpt a life that allows for this movement out of object-based consciousness. It will create meditation for itself. It will create devotional realities, magical realities, sometimes otherworldly realities, ultimately the non-divided reality itself, in which everything is operating. That life will choose to meditate upon that undividedness and wake up into it completely. This again is enlightenment. This is what it means to become an enlightened being. And to follow whatever cues, whatever intuitive paths, whatever teachings are necessary in order to break the spell of your own tendency to lock down back into heavy unhappiness, which is that state of that object-based reality. To live in the measured is to die. To live in the immeasurable is to breathe and to live, to feel exaltation, to feel exhilaration, to feel that life is precious, that life is sacred, that life is holy, that it is something way beyond a utilitarian viewpoint, that the life of profit is superficial and cheap and tawdry, to live just in that dimension. And so this is what's at stake. It's becoming an object to yourself. That's the final peril about human existence, is that you can in fact make a series of decisions that lock down your life into this less auspicious reality. And there are certain promises and certain rewards you get for doing that, provided by the supervisors of that viewpoint, the representatives of that viewpoint, which are represented by things like certain kinds of politics, certain kinds of religion, certain kinds of scientific activity. Depending on which group you get associated with, which viewpoint you begin to favor, you then enter into a kind of relationship with the people in that group, where you'll see how very complex this becomes when the notion of rewards are introduced and what you get. Like if you work at a very destructive job that destroys your spirit, but all the cheerleaders in that department say, the Ferrari is worth it. Spend your life around profit. Get that sports car, because that's where it's really at. Then if you live into that, then that's what you get. There's your reward. Whereas the people who are voicing the viewpoint of the real are always advocating what might appear to be a poverty consciousness. Like what St. Francis of Assisi, for example, espoused, that sort of lifestyle, who said that things weren't that important. What was important is how you lived every day. Of course, his reward was the Catholic Church, and that's something to think about. And you see how complex this issue becomes once you start to look into it more subtly, about how you can only ultimately be responsible for yourself and cannot accept any authority, because authorities will always be not so well put together, not as intelligently structured as one might think. So one has to learn to rely on one's own intelligence, one's own intuition, one's own comprehension, and above all, one's own relationship with the real, to continue to live inside the real. So this becomes a relationship of non-duality, where the very being that needs to become free manifests its own freedom.
I like something you said last week too, or maybe the week before, about the mind waking up, and it's like rejuvenation of this waking up is a rejuvenation of your whole beingness, that you just come alive and it's living, yeah. It's just, but how that happens is the mystery of, that we're all looking for, to how to be happy, that it's the nature of your own mind.
But you still have to find that relationship with your mind, with its root, and therefore with what is truly real. That's the trick. And that's what we're doing. That's what I'd like to think is going on here.
So you think that comes to one point? Is it finally come to one point where it opens up?
Yes, but we can't consider it a measured point. We can't consider it a point that literally opens. It's got to be something on a continuum so that we can get inside this thing. See, I don't want to turn it into a final experience. There's danger in that.
Mm-hmm.
You follow?
Mm-hmm.
But you are correct when you say that the result of turning into the real is essentially the rebirth of the human mind, the rebirth of the entire body, mind, spirit complex. There's something that happens to the entire structure of your life when you find this, when you begin to taste this. And it's something that is incomparable to anything else. No one can promise you this sort of thing because it's not something out there. It's not something you can really...
So finding that, is that like the thoughts finally just surrender and they realize this is the truth and wow, there's nowhere to go, and they just are absorbed into that truth?
We have to be careful because we don't want to state beforehand what's going to be necessary to create this. Sometimes you have to seek. You have to look for an answer. Other times you realize your seeking is a problem. But again, this becomes subtly complex because you have to come deeply into recognizing what your seeking is to know that. So again, it's simply the division of the boundary between yourself and yourself. That's essentially what it is. But there's so many ways that this can be done that I don't want to lay out a formula. But I will say this, that this is one way to do it, being with me. If you're interested, if you have that sort of angle of perception, that viewpoint, and you come here with that viewpoint, I can't impose this on anyone because it's not the sort of thing that you can impose. But let's put it this way. I offer an invitation into this reality through the relationship that we construct here. And this is done collectively because it's a room with several people in it, but it's more importantly done in consciousness, in your consciousness and in my consciousness together while we are here. And you can go by your direct experience to see whether this is happening or not.
Well, I also have the thought, a society point of view, so it could be a mass awakening. The collective mind comes together. We explore this. There's an opening of that more aliveness and awakening. Everybody's consciousness, it's still one anyway, so there's like a group awakening too, probably.
Only if many people were to do this internally on their own. But we can't run after the group. The group is just another object. It's another illusory artifact created by false hope, real despair, and the movement towards solving the problem as some objective solution. So you can see how dangerous that is, as when someone gives you an answer. Like if someone says, well, just come to my church, I'll give you faith. Well, whose faith? You're going to give me your faith? Are you going to give me your pastor's faith? Are you going to give me the faith that your pastor has accepted from his authoritative sources? Or are you going to give me something that I can look firsthand in my own heart to see if it's true or not? So everybody has answers that they pass around. This is a common human entertainment and pastime. And answers themselves become the little rewards inside that object-based universe when you don't have enough fervor to go to the very root of it all and chop it down, way down where it begins. The Buddha, according to what we've read about his history and through examining his teachings, executed this process of going to the very root of attention and dealing with the problem there rather than as some objective solution. Even the creation of monks and monasteries, that seemed to be something that happened after the fact of his own awakening. But this is a debatable point, and we'd have to go into comparative religious studies to argue it, so we won't do that. But I'm just throwing that out there as an idea to enjoy for now. So as we're sitting here and we contemplate and meditate deeply on this topic and begin to feel like we are inside of a reality which is activating, then we get the actual first-hand recognition of what's going on. As you feel yourself becoming more awake, more clarified, if your body starts to feel more fluidic, you start to sense sensations moving through the body, some energy, or some symptom of an extraordinary nature coming into your own waking consciousness. That's the sign of the beginning of the dissolution of this objectified consciousness that we live in conventionally. We just live in it habitually. It's very easy to do because it's the source of all outer achievements. But when you're looking for inner achievement, it's a different path. That's what's tricky. And you need to move your attention, or don't move your attention, in such a way that you begin to recollect your true being. True being. That's why I was talking about the process of eternal vigilance earlier, in light of this being an ongoing and eternal process of being in your own reality, of being in that which is real. If you were to just stand outside and not do anything, let's say you could stand or sit on a bench for, let's say you could sit 48 hours, just from sitting there, dust would collect on you, the dust from outdoors. You'd become dusty, you'd need to wash up. So, to be clean, you have to go home and wash up every day. You have to take care of yourself. In the same way, there's no room for any stagnation when it comes to being in what is real. The real is not some idealized location where there's no further relationship with you as an active agent, as someone who's responsible. So this becomes a choice that you make, an ongoing choice, an ongoing lifestyle, an ongoing focus. And once you get into the groove of it, it becomes natural. And when it becomes so natural that you don't even have to assume its activity, and that you are riding on the wave of grace, the grace that that field of the real provides, then you actually wake up, go on waking up, and never can be put back to sleep in that sense. Yes?
It is ultimately, for me, knowing the truth of the reality, but respecting the illusion. For in this physical form, in this moment, this is where I am. Also residing in the mind, the presence of the mind, and knowing that truth. that consciousness. Is it awake? Yes, it is awake. It understands the nature of what it is to live in illusion of third density, even fourth or fifth density. There's a materiality to it. But the reality is that I am in consciousness that is beyond this.
If you know that, then there's no problem. But you can realize and perhaps appreciate as well that you talked about different levels of density, that people can get absorbed into believing that some of these levels are ultimately real, when the ultimate real is not one of those states. So that's why I'm talking about vigilance and using that word. Not because I think that the world of objects is evil or anything, no. But when you adopt it unthinkingly and operate in it, it begins to condition you, and then before you know it, you're being used by the forces that operate in that dimension for unhealthy reasons. And so you can actually lose your life, your real life as consciousness, as the root of being, because you are operating without that absolute sense of vigilance every second. But how can anyone ever maintain that? You have to ask that question. And what is that? What does that vigilance look like? I'm not going to provide an answer to that because I am not an authority in that sense. But I'm going to invite you into that consideration and question for yourself. I want to see if I can wiggle this thing in front of you so you go for it, however you go for it. One thing you can say is that a person who is living in merely object-based consciousness is really not happy. They have not really tasted pure happiness. And even though there are levels of happiness they might have tasted, they might have gone on a nice cruise to Alaska or Bermuda, or have gone to Costa Rica and eaten fresh coconuts or whatever. And there are lots of stored memories of pleasurable and beautiful experiences. What I am talking about is something that doesn't happen anywhere, actually. It's a non-perceivable recognition. It's a paradox. But it's where God, consciousness, dwells. The consciousness of what we would call the ultimate consciousness of the universe. And so everyone has to be lovingly invited into that by someone who has an open heart. That's the most that can be done. Who doesn't have a motive, an ulterior motive. That is the one most important thing. Because this can be abused too. Just sitting here talking as I am talking can be a form of abuse if I am carrying ultimate motives of where I want to go with this once I get you to acknowledge the truth of what I say. So that's why I have to completely sever myself at a certain point and just say, it's your life. You have to do what you want. We've got to keep this clean and pristine and unstained the way it really is. Which doesn't mean that I'm some kind of super moral type or religious type. I am not a holy sadhu. I completely deny all of that. I am not a saint. I am not a religious type. Absolutely not. To me, those are all weirdities that are used to hook people into seductive forms of spiritual illusion. But this is a very complicated topic. The more we go into it, the more profound the topic becomes. So you have to go into this in a way that is recognizable to you. I'll just try to open up doors, and you walk in the door. You do what you need to do. At the same time, I am facilitating a direct radiation of consciousness right now. A direct and palpable, now this is my belief, I can't prove this to you, I can't get a map out and tell you exactly why it's all happened. I'm going to speak just intuitively to you, that there's a radiant connection offered in this moment whereby we can actually enjoy some aspect of this resuscitation together simply because we are breathing in the same room, breathing in the same space. It's not because we all believe the same thing. It's not because we all believe in the same God or the same guru or the same idea about consciousness, but it's because we're actually organismically connecting on the level of vitality. If that makes sense. Something we can actually feel together in each other happening at the same time. Do you feel this? Yes, see? It's very easy to feel. It's very easy to feel. Are there any other questions or concerns? Yes.
When you're aware that you're in this sort of bog, like you're talking about, you created, whether it's accepting work that's really drudgery, but you feel, I have to do it, you have that old pull going on. There's the new and then there's the old, and you're in between. Can you just speak about breaking free? You've been talking about it, and I love it, but just, I know I've been in that place for a while now, right now. That's the place I've been in. And there's something just calling, but the body gets kind of conditioned to that state. You have to break out of it somehow. To free your cells.
So are we going to address something in the imagination that the mind is considering a problem now in fantasy about what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day, in the sense that I've been dealing with this problem, and so how am I going to deal with it? That's the measured consciousness in its most seductive form. To get you to believe that there is some outer thing that's preventing you from making this connection now. See, if you can't cut that right out in the sense of your own wakefulness being present with you now, then what could tomorrow possibly provide for you? However flowery I might try to offer such a response to you. Follow?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have anything but this moment to give this teaching to you. I'm not worried about whether you perfect it tomorrow or not. I'm not even worried about whether you can hear it now. Although I do have enough regard for you, enough respect, that I will address this to you as though you really care to hear it. But that's as far as I can go. To me, everything that matters is happening right within these milliseconds. Any other questions or concerns? It's very alive. Are you alive? Are you feeling alive in this moment? Are you feeling everything turned on in you, turned up, like circuits have begun to connect? That's all I'm asking, is that you notice that. And see what that is. See yourself in terms of that. What is that? Who are you? Who are you?
Doing well, feeling the shakti very strong as per usual. It's like lightning, pretty awesome. Yeah, at the intensive last week, I was there one day. We talked about eating meat. Before that, I was basically a vegan for 2 years and vegetarian. But it came up in another message from consciousness, essentially, that I should start eating meat. And I did, and it's just odd because I still feel guilty about it. But I know it's a more or less old, probably Indian thing from a past life. And it probably has some relevance too, as far as animal cruelty, and then doing free range, organic, grass fed, like the most cruelty free beef possible, and it's 3 times a week. But I gotta say, I feel much more grounded and out of my head, and it's just pretty, it's just, I don't have much of a question, but if you could.
It's a lifestyle choice. That's a
Yeah.
topic that I address as a lifestyle choice. It's something that you know what's best for you. And I'm going to refrain from any personal judgment. Whether I agree or disagree with your choice, I might agree, I might disagree. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you learn from your own experience, and if you are helping yourself by eating something different at this stage in your life, then I hope that that comes to serve you well.
Yeah, thank you. I guess maybe the mind is making a problem that's really not there, but it's
Well, you'll find out. You'll find out. Don't worry about it now. Everyone's entitled to make a mistake if they do make a mistake, but it may be a mistake for you not to eat meat. Who knows what's a mistake in this case? I don't know.
all right, thank you.
Yes. Someone else.
I'm just smiling because earlier this evening I had read an article about a girl who's 23 and she's a physicist, and after I got reading it I said, God, I'm really stupid. Like my mind is like this person can just do so much with their mind, and I started measuring myself against this person. I thought, just my natural mind, I'm like, God, what can I do? I could never do what this person does. And then you go on talking about this, and because I was sitting there going like, I just have my heart. That's what I have. I guess that's what I can't theorize things, and I don't know, But I was smiling because you talking actually kind of knocked that out of my mind and put me back into my heart about measuring and comparing. And,
Good.
yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
So you've had a shift.
Yes, I did, yeah.
You see how you have to be vigilant that this can come up anytime?
Yes, it happened like that, too.
Because life is always moving on. Yes, hi.
Could you talk about how you deal with an abusive person and stay away from either absorbing it, or what do you do in that situation with that outside world thing that comes in when you're trying to be in the consciousness that's...
So that's a very gross or expressed dilemma here you're expressing. Let's take this very slowly. I want to approach this from a different angle with you, because advice comes easy, and it's easy to give other people advice. The easiest thing for me to do would be to say certain things that would be expected of me to say, so I'm not going to do that. But what I want to say is I would like to erect a relationship with you right now between you and me. Can you feel this consciousness with me this evening?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you say yes to that, can you give me some feedback as to what that means to you, so I can get a sense of where you are in terms of this relationship?
I feel it in my heart.
Your heart is opening?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that feeling feel like?
Well, it feels, if I can actually feel the heart, I can actually feel, it feels substantial. It feels like it has a sensitivity and like color.
It's real.
Yeah. it's
You're
real.
coming into the real with
It's a
me.
real heart, yeah.
Yeah,
Like
see.
an organ, not a philosophical heart, but an
Right.
organ. Yeah.
Real.
Like a body, a feeling of a body part.
Is there an emotional counterpart with that? Because you're saying you're feeling an organ, which is physiological. Is there an emotional counterpart to that feeling?
Energy.
Ah, that's very important.
Mhm.
So it's not just a physical organ, but it in fact is connected up with a kind of vitality that to open that also opens up the circuitry that we can call bioelectrical in nature, that energy is involved with this awakening, yes?
Mhm.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, I just want to help draw it out of you.
Right. I mean, it's hard to sit still.
Right. Or you may find later, you might find that it's actually very easy to sit still. But maybe you're just in this place now where things are becoming unearthed so you can touch this reality with me. Do you follow?
Mhm.
So right now it's a little agitated. But let's keep watching this. Let me keep watching over you and continue to know that we're dwelling in the same consciousness, you and me. You're not out there and away from me. You're actually inside this orb or sphere of relational electricity and bliss. Okay? And let's see where this initial experience that you're having goes. Let's see what this transforms into next. I haven't avoided your question or concern, but this is the only way that I can actually approach it in an intelligent and responsible way. Because look, if we're changing your actual vibration of living, and if all of the relationships you're in express a vibration that you are in, then to uplift and change and modify your vibration may be one way to deal with this problem of abuse and attracting abuse and living with abuse and so on. I don't want to get too specific beyond this point, but you can see where I am going with this.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So for someone like you that there is a challenge, you know where I am. You know where I come. I come to this place and I give teachings. So we'll see if once you leave here and objecthood swallows you again, if there's any remnant of David 5 or 6 days from now, if you can remember to come back here and enjoy this ritual of spontaneous heart awakening with me. This ritual, this living ritual that I engage with people. You would be surprised, and I'm not going to say too much more, but you would be shocked at where this can go. If you have an interest. If you have an interest. So I'm trying to make it juicy and seductive. I'm saying come back if you want. But tonight something's already happening, so it's begun. We don't know what's next. We don't know what you'll choose, but it will be interesting to see. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I hope I answered your question to your satisfaction.
Strengthen the heart. Strengthen the consciousness.
And begin to believe in what's happening this evening to you. Begin to believe and turn your attention into that to see where this goes now. A door has been opened, you've already walked into it. But what's beyond these first few steps? What's down the hall? That was a wonderful offering. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any other concern or question? Just let this bliss circulate now. Feel this happening. Feel this. Anyone else?
Clearing old, is it memories? What? And there's a sense of hope that I'm experiencing in terms
Right, this second.
of letting go of.
Yes.
So there's a vision of old stuff somehow
Right.
going away.
Good. Let it dissolve. And see what comes in the wake of that dissolution. See what comes to replace that. Just stay with me. Go ahead.
Wholeness.
Yes. It's wholeness, not the word wholeness, not the dictionary word wholeness, but it's something that corresponds to that word. When your self returns to you, when your broken self is healed into one self, broken self becomes healed.
It feels physical.
Yes, it is physical. That's part of it.
Yeah, like you said, a reintegration.
Yes, it's happening now.
As if pieces are falling back into me.
Yes, and peace is dawning.
Mm.
P-E-A-C-E. Not only are pieces falling, but watch P-E-A-C-E.
Right.
Watch what happens when your mind begins to get the message of this wholeness. What happens up here? There's an interesting thing that might occur.
Doesn't have to work so hard.
Does what have to work so hard?
The mind.
No, the mind doesn't have to work at all.
So there's an intuition, there's a feeling of trusting and intuition.
Yes, yes, you're being set free now. So there's no need to think that you have to do something beyond that. You're enjoying the fruition of our togetherness.
Right.
So what role has the mind played up to this point, other than...
Efforting to try and figure things out.
Okay, but this is all happening naturally for you.
Now there's more a feeling of answers just coming, just
Yes.
being.
You're no longer in conflict with yourself. You're whole now.
Right,
So now the answers come. Yes.
right. There's that feeling.
Good. That's it. Take a breath. Your prana is changing. You feel how your breathing is changing?
Mm-hmm.
Can you feel all this happening?
Yeah. Yeah. There's yeah.
Your prana is becoming supercharged with my prana, if you don't mind allowing me to make it so personal like that.
Yeah. There's a calmness.
That's the peace I was talking about. P-E-A-C-E. Yes.
Right.
You feel it now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a tranquilizer all over the body. You
Mhm.
feel it? Muscle relaxant.
Yeah.
It's better than those muscle relaxants. This is the real deal.
And there's a sense of less anxiety or
Yes, look at you. You're changing. Your whole physiognomy is changing. You're
Right.
opening like a flower. So you're opening into your own organic nature now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now let's see what more there is to be revealed out of this now. Already you're growing into this. So let's see where this goes now.
The thought or not the thought, but the feeling is I like myself now.
Yes, oh, what a self there is to like. This is the self of being. How can you not like it?
Interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Yeah, letting go of perfectionism and self-judgment.
All of that.
Don't have that feeling right now.
Those are all measurements. Those all come from the measured reality.
Or embarrassment in talking in front of people. You know?
All of that. It's all illusion, all measured consciousness, all based on fear, the contraction that comes about from living in a measured reality. And so we are undoing that right now. We're undoing the measured consciousness and we're coming into the immeasurable. Yes, indeed.
Wow.
It's mind-blowing. Depends on how far you want to
It
go
is.
with this.
Sure.
It's all up to you.
Yeah.
I'm Santa Claus. I have lots of gifts that you can't even see, stuffed in my pockets, everywhere. It's just a question of what you truly ask for, what you really want, whether you make yourself known to me, and you're doing that, and whether you're taking this seriously. Then I take you very seriously. Most people come in to see me, they're like tourists passing a new location. They look, oh, how nice, goodbye. They don't really want to touch this because it goes too deep.
Mm-hmm.
It goes into everything. So once you go into everything, you wake up in everything and then you can't come out. Then this is your featured life, what you're experiencing now.
I feel like a child right now. I feel like a child.
A beautiful child.
Yeah.
You are that.
Without the, you know,
Yes.
that's what seems to be that joyfulness of a child when you're just playing in the grass or
That's
running
it.
around.
That is it. Innocence.
That feeling.
Innocent playfulness. Innocent joy.
Running on the beach, you know, jumping in the water.
I'm
that
there
kind of
right
thing.
now. I'm jumping and splashing right now. I'm wet with all the water. I have no bathing suit on. I'm so happy. I'm just feeling everything.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
No need for bathing suits because the water feels so wonderful. Just washing all over the body, mind.
And seeing flowers.
Flowers.
Picking dandelions.
Absolutely. All of this beauty.
Simple things.
Simple, beautiful,
Colors.
expansive.
Yellow, green.
No sadness, no joy.
Just in the moment. You know. Seeing a dog, seeing a cat, that kind of.
This is your natural state. You're always in this state.
Mm.
You can never lose this.
Huh.
Let's see where this goes now. Let's see where the beach experience goes. Flowers. Let's see what this unfolds into.